Welcome back to the channel. It's time to do a comic book retrospective. I got the crew back together. We've got Eric Breed, we've got Joe Corallo, and we've got Amazing Spider-Man 33. How you doing, Joe?
I'm all right, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and obviously the man that needs no introduction, the man so cool they call him the Breed. Eric Breed, how are you doing?
Well, you said you'd bring us back when you got to 28K, and here we are.
28K Wes is benevolent, you know. I was like, hey, let's make a little time for some.
He's a lot nicer than 27K Wes. Yeah.
We're going to talk about Amazing Spider-Man 33, released in February of 1966 from the illustrious creative duo of Lee and Steve Ditko. This is a character-defining moment here, Joe Corallo. You picked out this comic book. It's got one of the greatest covers in Spider-Man history.
Breen also, was heavily involved in this choice, but yeah, no, this is one thing for you continuity sticklers out there will notice on the cover it says the final chapter, and yet Amazing Spider-Man continues. Also, funny story, the month after this issue came out, in Fantastic Four was the coming of Galactus.
Man, so that is an interesting month to be reading comic books.
The embarrassment of riches of
Marvel Comics fans. So, Eric Breed, you're a little bit older than the two of us, but you weren't even reading comic books in 1966. You didn't really start reading until 75. When you finally get into Amazing Spider-Man, because he's not your gateway drug to comic books, and you get to Amazing Spider-Man 33, do you already know that this is a character-defining issue, or are you just blown away when you open it up?
Yeah, I really don't remember because in those days you didn't have access to a lot of reprint material unless you were buying the reprint comics that were coming out, but you also didn't have comic shops to get the back issues. So when I first read this, I'm guessing I was pretty steeped in Spider-Man lore by then, but this stood out just because of just the first 7 or 8 pages, the way it played out. And whether I knew it was a character defining moment, I don't know, but it's something that everybody that writes Spider-Man should have to read before they write Spider-Man.
Yeah, it should be one of the things that you think about, the sheer determination and will of the character, that he will not stop. He's so motivated that he will not allow himself to fail when someone that he loves, their lives are on the line or something like that, Joe.
Absolutely. I think it was, when Perchai interviewed Glenn Greenberg, basically saying that the Steve Ditko and the John Romita issues, that is the foundation of Spider-Man. That is the sacred text. That is what, if you are working on Spider-Man, you need to understand that sort of stuff inside and out, and then everything builds on that. But you have to have those sort of fundamentals. And yeah, this issue, reading it again, it's amazing how you could put out an issue like this that is the final chapter of a short epic, but is completely self-contained in the sense that you could hand this to someone that could read it, they'll completely understand everything that's going on.
One of the reasons why so many people love Steve Ditko is even on the second page when he sees the images of Aunt May and Uncle Ben, as he's plagued with self-doubt, trying to get this machinery off of him, and then just the way they draw it out in the full page splash when he finally does. You think, okay, everything's great now. And then he finds out that apparently Acme had a 2-for-1 deal on Henchmen, so he's got a bunch of those to go through before he can get to May. So it's great.
He does go through through his paces of this. Well, let's get into the comic book itself. Like we said, this is a character-defining moment within a comic book. It happens in the very first few pages of the book. Peter is trapped underneath all of this equipment. He's in an underwater, I guess, a bunker or something like that. There's a leak in it, and it's getting worse, and he's gonna drown. And there's serum sitting in front of him. He needs to get it to Dr. Kurt Connors to save Aunt May because she's had some type of poisoning or something like that. They got to fix her blood. And if he doesn't get to it, Aunt May is not going to live. These wonderful 9-panel grids where there's all this self-doubt. Peter Parker is trying to pick himself up, realizing he can't do it, but willing himself to do it. And you see him go through the rigmarole of all these emotions that are going through this and what define the character, who he is today, Joe Corallo. It's just amazing stuff. And then when you finally get the moment where he finally rises up to celebrate it and realizing he's not done yet, just all the much more better.
pages 4 and 5, 5 being the big splash page, but page 4 being the one where he's really lifting it up, and you have like the 3 panels at the top. These pages should be next to each other in a museum. They're absolutely gorgeous, totally character defining, potentially the most character defining of Ditko's era. I think you can almost encapsulate, not the, expanded cast, but Spider-Man as a character in Ditko's era. I think these 2 pages sum it up spectacularly.
Absolutely. They do try to replay it in a couple of Spider-Man movies, Breed, but it never feels quite as good as this comic book.
You could argue that page 5 of this is the most iconic single panel in Marvel Comics history.
Absolutely. There's definitely an argument to be made for that one. And like I said, once he frees himself and he overcomes this and he has the power and the will to overcome it, he's not done yet. He's tired. His leg is injured. But he's also got to get out of here and get back to Dr. Cotter and his Aunt May. He's got to swim through the bowels of this base. And when he comes back out, we've got the Master Planers gang there. And they put him through his paces, Breed. This is one of the craziest strategies I've ever seen a superhero go through. Peter Parker's like, I'm really tired. My muscles ache. My leg is very, very damaged. I don't know if I can take these guys as it is right now. So I'm just going to let them beat the hell out of me for a couple of pages so I can recuperate. And then when they're a little bit tired, then I'm going to beat the crap out of them.
Heavyweight boxers have employed that strategy to get people to punch themselves out.
But not against 20 people.
But yes, but this is the superhero version of that. And what a great idea. Especially, you've got him thinking, you get to see his thoughts as they're beating. He's going, I'm starting to feel a little better, and this is starting to hurt a little bit. I guess I might as well just go ahead and finish him off now. And these fight scenes, like I said, Ditko really knew how to move a story along. It may not have been the greatest at anatomy or drawing people in general, but you can't beat the way he would map out a story. And the fight scene is a perfect example of that.
And we do know this is all because of Doc Ock. He's the one that's the mastermind behind this. But like he mentioned earlier, Joe, Doc Ock is not in this comic book. He is free to go. And he's obviously escaped the scene of the crime and everything. And then it becomes a story of Peter Parker bringing the serum to Kurt Connors. And he also tests his own blood to make sure that it'll actually save Aunt May. Really interesting stuff here. And obviously this is the Kurt Connors that hasn't exactly become a villain yet.
Yeah, you had the run-in before where he's, he became the Lizard, and it wasn't to the point that people get to later where he's, constantly trying to turn everyone into lizards all the time. We have that here, and then you also have, Peter, as this is moving along, is trying to make things right with, was it Frederick Foswell? Because he originally thought that he might have been the master planner. So there was tension there because, they really involved the, supporting cast in this a lot, because you could have a large supporting cast of non-superhero characters. He sets up the camera, does all this stuff, gives them the scoop of taking in the henchmen there and foiling the master planner's plan is kind of a way to, make amends. Not in a way that he would understand, but in Peter's own mind, he had to do the right thing.
I love the look on J. Jonah Jameson's face when he's imagining that perhaps we have proof that Spider-Man is a murderer now, or that Spider-Man is this notorious criminal, and I'm finally going to get my headline, because he doesn't know exactly what Frederick Foswell is going to go see, but the sheer delight on his face as he imagines that he's finally going to get Spider-Man. It felt like a good version of J. Jonah Jameson.
Spider-Man, the J. Jonah Jameson panel you're talking about, Betty Brant's line, I don't know how she knows because she's behind him, but she goes, Mr. Jameson, you're smiling. Is anything wrong? That's
I love that
so
line.
Perfect for the. And I also want to point out, one of the doctors working on Aunt May is black, and this was published in '65. That was years before DC, had any black characters in their books at all. Because that was one of the things that Spider-Man was known for, was they would put black policemen in the background and doctors when they would do hospital scenes, because in those days Aunt May had her own suite, so she was always there.
Yeah.
So
She was definitely always at the hospital. So Peter has got to pay the bills. He's going to have to pay for Aunt May's medical expenses, the hospital stay. He's got to get his equipment out of hock. So he ends up going to the Bugle, and he is beat to hell. His face is all jacked up. He can't walk right. And Betty Brant is a little bit sweet on Peter. And she goes up to him, and she's like, oh, my goodness, what happened to you, Peter? And he doesn't come off as good boyfriend material in this moment when he tells her exactly how he feels, knowing that it's absolutely going to give her an episode as she has this big flashback to what happened to a family member. And he realizes, maybe I shouldn't be dating this lady.
Yeah, she'd already met Ned by then. And it was kind of Peter was kind of on the way out by then. So he kind of made it an easy choice.
Yeah, this is way before Ned was, killed.
There's a great interaction also between Peter Parker and J. Jonah Jameson when he finally goes in his office, and he's like, "We need pictures. We need pictures for this story that we're getting." And Peter obviously comes in with them, and he's like extorts him. He's like, "I'm going to make him pay $100 a picture for this." But in J. Jonah Jameson's mind, he realizes these are worth twice that much, so he's still screwing Peter over, even though Peter thinks he's getting one over on J. Jonah Jameson.
I love that bit because it really shows you the importance and what you can do with thought bubbles to really elevate a story. Because that's the kind of thing where you couldn't quite get that across by just facial expressions or just gestures. That exact idea of they're worth twice as much. And, what you'd have now is a caption that more or less says the same thing, and it's like, just be a thought bubble. Like, it's okay. You don't have to have a caption that's instead of like J. Jonah Jameson realizes that it's it's like you're doing the same thing. So,
just shorthand.
Yeah,
by attributing it to him rather than stating his name and all that stuff. I really love that stuff. I like it when they really played up that J. Jonah Jameson, while he might have the most pure intentions, to make $1 or whatever, really wants Peter or Spider-Man to be a villain, and he's always tried to screw over Peter Parker's breed. That's just the best thing about the character.
And going forward, as J. Jonah Jameson he's made appearances in the Avengers, Daredevil, Captain America, etc. That's kind of like Spider-Man's his kryptonite. I mean, he is a good man. There's a Spider-Man story where a bigoted politician is running for office, and he turns on him instantly and basically goes after him. So it's just like Spider-Man. It was his blind spot for decades, and sometimes the writers would exaggerate that for comedic effect, but by and large, J. Jonah Jameson is a good, fair man in every respect except for Spider-Man.
Yeah, he definitely shows it in this story. I definitely enjoyed that conversation, and the thought bubbles were amazing. And we do get a nice little scene here at the end, Joe. Peter Parker's leaving. He saved Aunt May. He's confirmed it. He's finally going to go home. He's beat to hell. He's tired, but now he can go. He can lay down knowing that his aunt is going to be okay. And the nurse, as she's closing the blinds so Aunt May can go to sleep, just thanks to her, or I think she even states out loud, I really wish all teenagers would want to be like somebody like Peter Parker. He's well-mannered. He's respectful. He's a good young man, but they all want to be like that stupid vigilante Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fun. And then on top of that, to get you excited for the next issue, pretty big panel at the bottom that Craven is prying open.
Coming back.
That he's back. Like, I kind of wish that, they went a little further and had like the sides that he's gripping on, like crumbling apart or something like that as he's like prying it open. But, it's a little nitpick. It's a little extra. It's like I want that cherry on top, but it works.
Well, they figured that would work better than next issue, the return of Aunt May to this very hospital after yet another
she gets sick again. This is a great comic book, and you can see why that particular image has been reproduced in so many ways. They try to recreate that particular moment, whether it be in cartoons, obviously in movies, recapture it in posters and stuff like that, because there is a lot of energy to it. It's an amazing moment. It's a character-defining moment, and when you think of Peter Parker, Spider-Man, in his Spider-Man persona, you should be thinking about that moment. That's who he is as a hero.
And it's again, big part of Steve Ditko there, because at this point, starting, I believe it was issue 25, he does get, co-plotting or plotting credit.
Yes, he does.
For every issue. Not scripting, Stan's very, particular on that. But, he does get the plotting, and he really did add a lot to Spider-Man.
And it's a great encapsulation just of Spider-Man as a character as well, Bree. Not just that moment, which is amazing, of him as Spider-Man. You get the Peter Parker, J. Jonah Jameson stuff. You get the Peter Parker, I needed to hawk stuff up, but I need to make some money because Aunt May is in trouble. You get a little bit of the relationship stuff, although it's not with Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane. Obviously, it's Betty Brant, but it's very brief there. You get all the wonderful interpersonal relationships and those conflicts that are always bubbling beneath the surface of a Spider-Man comic. So you really get everything that you want for Peter Parker Spider-Man in one comic book, and that's the way it should be. There's a reason it's a classic.
This was a great collaboration. I'm glad, though, that it ended a few issues later, because the Ditko version of Peter Parker was that guy blowing off Betty.
Because he's a little bit more of a jerk.
Well, yeah, he
did antagonize Flash Thompson. He might have asked him.
His vision of Peter Parker was for him to remain aloof, friendless, basically that guy. John and Stan had a different idea, and that's how Gwen, Mary Jane, the kind of like
Archie version of Spider-Man.
The Archies, for lack of a better term, yeah.
Fair.
But for these 38 issues, though, this might have been the best.
If you just can't get enough of this in classic Spider-Man, Breen and Joe and I have got your hookup. This isn't the only time we talk about Amazing Spider-Man and some of the great stories. In fact, we went back and we reviewed both issues where they killed the Stacys, Gwen Stacy and her father. For some more classic Spider-Man comics, definitely check out this video right here. There's also a link in the video description.